Hello and welcome back to Talking Europe. A right to die with dignity or a slippery slope to legalized murder. Debates over assisted dying have been going on in Europe for a long time, but they seem to have intensified with France, Belgium, Portugal and Ireland all recently reconsidering their legislation or at least launching consultations on the subject. Only a handful of European countries allow what's known as active euthanasia, where a doctor administers a lethal dose of drugs. You can see those countries on our map. Essentially, they're the Benelux states, which were in the European vanguard on this issue in the early years of this century. But there are other means of helping those who are suffering to end their lives. Those include allowing patients to give themselves a lethal dose, that's the Swiss notion of assisted suicide, or allowing someone to request that life-preserving treatments be stopped, which has been termed passive assisted dying in the Nordic countries, for example. Well, to discuss these various arrangements and their merits and shortcomings, I'm joined by Asita Kanko, a Belgian MEP for the European Conservatives and Reformists. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
I'm also pleased to welcome Alfred Sant, a Maltese MEP for the Socialists and Democrats. Welcome to you as well. Alfred, maybe we can start with Malta, because obviously it is quite a conservative society, but things are moving, as in the other European countries that I mentioned.
Well, it's been put on the agenda, on the political agenda, both by the government, led on this one by the deputy leader of the Labour Party, which is in government. However, it's been sort of placed on the shelf for the moment, because it's been overtaken by another wider debate about abortion in Malta, which is still banned. And that, therefore, is on the forefront of how things go.
But so in Malta, although active euthanasia and assisted suicide are both illegal, right? But withdrawal of treatment is legal. And if you combine that with what's known as palliative sedation, does that provide a dignified enough end to someone's life, in your opinion?
That is not really set out by law. It's done through medical practice.
Yeah.
Some people are dissatisfied with it. Others say that's the limit of how we could go. It's still up for debate.
Yeah. Asita Kanko, what about the situation in Belgium?
Well, the situation in Belgium is quite advanced compared to most countries in the world. We have had we had a very open debate about this, but it remains quite sensitive. You know, all the ethical topics like right to die in dignity or abortion rights. All these topics are quite sensitive, have a different level of sensitivity depending on which country you are in the EU. So how is it concretely in Belgium? You can request euthanasia, but you need to be fully conscious when you do that. You also need to have, there are conditions. You need to have an unbearable form of suffering, and you need to express your will, and then there will be a decision. Of course, there is still a debate on how far can you go, but when I look at this situation, what I personally think is that, of course, we can have an opinion about what people wish for, but opinions do not define what kind of rights that we have. And people have the right to self-determination, and self-determination means what you want to do when you are alive, but how you also want to die, depending on the conditions set by law. So the rights that are guaranteed to us will not depend on the desires that we have or what other people think about it, but on the rights that we have
of the individual
been
making the choice.
Yeah.
But Alfred Sant, do you think this is a grey area? Because, okay, self-determination, I understand that point, but what about whether somebody is really fully in command of their faculties? I mean, there are different definitions of what that actually means, aren't there?
I think that's the real problem. It's not the problem of whether euthanasia is legitimate or not. It is. So it should be legal. But how to define it, how to put it in force. Not just in terms of how the individual feels in terms of pain, but also in terms of what the guys around him are doing. Because they could be also, there could be influences on him that push him towards that decision. So that also has got to be determined in terms of legal terms. that are socially clear and medically correct.
What about that safeguard, Asita Kanko? Is there such a thing in Belgium to stop to guarantee that there's no pressure on somebody because they're costing too much, so to speak, and all of that.
Yeah, and in fact, in Belgium, it's really clearly defined that you also need to be in full command of your faculties, but it needs to be established that you are not under pressure, of course, to do so. And the decision that is taken has also to comply with several set of rules. There have been some mistakes made in the past by doctors. So I think that the collaboration with doctors who have to assist in this also need to be increased. And there have been a situation where someone was apparently not really wanting to have this euthanasia, or some things were wrong, and now there is a legal procedure about it. So these things should not happen. So we need to be very careful with a law like this in its implementation.
So there was already an abuse of the system, you're saying?
I don't know the details of the case. It's a legal case, but there is a case where there are question marks, and the person has always underwent euthanasia. But I want to give you another example. You know, there have been debates where people say, when you are sick of your life and you are just unhappy, you can also have but no, this is not. Then you need maybe a therapist. Then you need a friend. Then you need a society where every human being is not an island. So I think we need to balance what are we ready to do for each other instead of letting people down. So there is this right, and there is also how are we actually welcoming each other in society, and kind of promoting the will to die is also not the intention.
Alfred Sant, is there a slippery slope where we go from saying somebody is feeling, hopeless about their life, therefore, in some circumstances, they'll be given the right to die, and then from that, it develops to, I'm tired of life, or something like that? I mean, is it a progression towards doing things that medicine should be curing and not euthanasia?
The slippery slope or the gray area is that depression, deep depression, that's something that can make life unbearable as well.
Yeah.
So how do you define that? How do you define that in terms of having big pain, physical pain, that's unstoppable, that's unendurable?
But depression has been treated.
There's another area as well, which is quite grey. Suppose you have urges to kill, and you have that pathology to kill, and you say, I don't want that, I want to die. And that's also been something that has got to be, clarified as well, legally and medically.
I mean, I'm guessing you would both agree that this has to be a last resort, that actually the important thing is that healthcare systems should be very strong, that palliative care should be very strong, and that euthanasia, or whatever the formula that one uses, should not be applied until the very, very last option, basically.
I would say, of course, we need to have a better and better healthcare system. There is always room for improvement. We need to invest in research also for illnesses that we cannot really cure right now, so that we can help patients much better. But the last resort is not a decision of someone else. Otherwise, it's not self-determination. The last resort is the will of the person, and does that comply with what the law is saying? That should be the last moment, because otherwise the person is sovereign within the conditions established by the law. There is one woman who went jogging in Vilvoorde, the city where I live. She went jogging in the morning a couple of years ago, and she was attacked, raped, and left there. And since then, her life is never the same again. The perpetrator is now, not enduring the same circumstances. She requests euthanasia because of her situation, of despair, of unbearable mental pain, and she got the permission to have euthanasia. So in this example, what we need to do as a society, I feel shocked for this woman, is that we need to make sure that our people can run freely outside without being raped, for example. So there are plenty of problems that go even beyond healthcare that we need to solve to prevent such situation of despair and pain.
Yeah. Alfred Sant, so the MEPs wrote a letter to the European Commission a while back, and they were basically urging the European Commission to come up with proposals for various measures across the EU. Not harmonization, we have to say, but certain things like, circulation of people between different countries. So if they want to have an end-of-life procedure in another country, also this question of portable living wills, so that people say what should happen to them if they're incapacitated. Do you think there's an argument for not harmonization, but at least some sort of convergence, or it's better to leave all of this to individual European states?
I think that it should be left to individual European states. I don't like the EU entering this kind of area at all. Health harmonization, health policy convergence, yes, but not issues like abortion, not issues like euthanasia, no.
What do you think of that? One size fits all, probably not, right?
No, I think, Europe has a specific set of competences, and this is clearly a member state competence. So we need to leave it to the member states. But I would like to ask a concrete question. Imagine that a person A, is living in Germany or in France and would like, or someone from France is living in Belgium. People go around inside the EU. We are seeing the member states, but the human beings living in the EU just move around. When you are in a concrete place, like in Belgium and you want euthanasia, what are your rights? Probably the same as the people who are locally living there. So I think the EU, at a certain extent, maybe does not have a lot of grip on the reality.
Okay, we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much for this fascinating discussion, Asita Kanko and Alfred Sant. And that's all for this episode of Talking Europe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you very soon for another edition.